Why is everyone staring at me? I whispered under my breath as I stepped into the grand ballroom, the chandeliers casting fractured light across the polished marble floors. My heels clicked softly against the surface, but each step felt louder than the last, echoing in a room suddenly hushed. The air smelled faintly of champagne and roses, a mixture that should have been celebratory, but my stomach twisted with unease. I adjusted the hem of my black dress, worn yet elegant enough for the occasion, feeling the familiar weight of my purse press against my side. Across the room, the chatter of Manhattan's elite dulled into an almost imperceptible hum, my green eyes darting over women in glittering gowns and men in tailored suits. That's when I saw him. Vincent Blackwood, standing near the terrace with his dark hair perfectly combed back, shoulders broad, eyes the color of stormy skies, surveying the room as though it were his chessboard and we were all pieces. The silence thickened around me, almost tangible, and a shiver ran down my spine. I tried to steady my breathing, counting in my mind, focusing on the warmth of the candlelight reflecting off the silverware, the faint clinking of glasses, anything to anchor myself. As I weaved between tables, a tray of champagne threatened to tip from my hands, and instinctively I grabbed it, my palms brushing against the cold metal. Vincent's gaze followed every motion, unwavering, intense. I could feel it like a physical pressure, a pull that made my heart race and my knees weak. I told myself it was coincidence, that perhaps he was simply looking at someone else, but the subtle narrowing of his eyes as he tracked me left no doubt. Time seemed to slow. Every footstep, every blink, every small gesture was magnified in my consciousness. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric as a waiter passed, the soft hum of the string quartet, yet all of it was drowned out by the awareness of his attention. I tried to focus on the other guests, pretending to sip my drink, but the corners of my vision constantly returned to him. A subtle smile, almost imperceptible, tugged at the corner of his mouth, and I felt the sudden warmth of being noticed in a way that had nothing to do with friendliness. My pulse quickened, a fluttering rhythm I couldn't control, and I reminded myself to breathe, slow and deliberate, anchoring my senses in the here and now. Yet the room seemed to conspire against me. Glasses clinked just a little too loud, a chair scraped the floor, and every small sound echoed as if emphasizing my presence. I walked toward the terrace, the hum of conversation still muted, and felt the slight brush of a passerby's hand against mine, jolting me back to the reality of being alive, being seen, being watched. I glanced at Vincent again, noting the precise way he stood, the easy grace of someone used to commanding attention, the subtle authority radiating without effort. He was observing, calculating, assessing, and in that moment, I realized that I had become part of a narrative larger than myself, that this encounter, this moment of quiet intensity, was the first step in a story I could not yet comprehend. The fluttering in my chest grew into a steady drumbeat as I navigated through the crowd, every glance from him sharpening my awareness, every shadow lengthening with the tension of anticipation. I told myself to keep composed, to maintain the facade of a professional, a guest, someone who belonged, but deep down I knew that nothing in this room would ever feel ordinary again. His gaze followed, unyielding, magnetic, a tether pulling me into something unavoidable. I tried to remind myself of the logic of distance, of reason, of the fact that I had my life, my plans, my ambitions, but none of that mattered under the weight of his scrutiny. A cool draft from the terrace swept past, rustling the papers on nearby tables, and I felt it brush against my skin like a warning. I shifted my stance, taking in the full scene, the sparkling dresses, the polished shoes, the golden light reflecting off crystal, yet every detail was filtered through the lens of being observed. Vincent took a single step forward, deliberate, measured, and I caught the faintest scent of cologne mixed with something darker, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my senses flare. My stomach tightened, my fingers curled slightly around the stem of my glass, and I realized that I was aware of my own heartbeat, of every breath, of every inch of myself, as if for the first time. The room remained silent, the collective attention hanging like a suspended note, and I understood that this was not a simple glance, not a passing curiosity. This was a moment of claim, of recognition, of silent communication that transcended words. I felt the pull of the narrative, the inexorable gravity of the story beginning to unfold, and knew, instinctively, that nothing in my life would prepare me for what was coming. Yet part of me was irresistibly drawn forward, step by step, into the intensity of his presence and the quiet storm he carried within him. I navigated the perimeter of the terrace, careful not to draw too much attention, my heels clicking softly against the marble and my mind racing with questions I could not answer. Every movement of Vincent Blackwood was precise, deliberate, and magnetic, pulling my focus despite my attempts to appear composed. A waiter passed by, offering a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and I instinctively reached for a plate, but my hand trembled slightly, the subtle quiver betraying my anxiety. I reminded myself to breathe, inhaling deeply through my nose, letting the cool air fill my lungs and grounding myself in the moment. As I adjusted the strap of my purse, I felt a small surge of awareness. Vincent had shifted his stance, his attention unwavering, following me like a silent observer with an intimate knowledge of the space around us. The soft hum of conversation in the room returned briefly, yet every word felt muted, every laugh subdued, as though the room itself bent around the gravity of his presence. I paused near a column, pretending to admire the intricate carvings, yet my eyes darted subtly toward him. He remained still, but his gaze tracked my every gesture, the tilt of my head, the way I held the wine glass in my hand, the almost imperceptible tension in my shoulders. A faint smile touched his lips, just enough to make my stomach tighten, a gentle reminder that he noticed, that he acknowledged my presence in a way no one else did. I took another careful step, my pulse quickening, and felt the sudden warmth of awareness settle over me. This was more than curiosity or idle observation. It was recognition, a silent communication that transcended the need for words. I allowed my eyes to meet his for a brief moment, and in that instant, I felt a ripple of something intangible, a subtle energy threading between us, pulling me into a current I could neither resist nor fully comprehend. The music swelled, a soft crescendo, and I felt a shiver run along my spine, the sensation heightened by the awareness of him observing, calculating, understanding. I adjusted my posture, standing straighter, drawing in my shoulders, and attempted to steady my expression, yet every controlled movement was mirrored by a heightened awareness of his scrutiny. The subtle brush of air from a passing server, the faint scent of fresh roses on a table nearby, the glint of crystal reflecting candlelight, all seemed amplified under the weight of his attention. I reminded myself to focus on the task at hand, offering smiles and polite nods to passing guests. Yet every interaction was filtered through the knowledge that he was watching, that the energy of the room had shifted, bending around his presence. I felt a curious blend of apprehension and fascination, a pull towards something I could not define, as though the space between us contained unspoken rules and uncharted territories. A gentle clink of silverware made me flinch, and I realized I had been holding my breath. Exhaling slowly, I let the tension drain just enough to regain a semblance of composure. Vincent shifted once again, a slight movement that seemed effortless, yet commanded my full attention. I noticed the subtle detail of his cufflinks catching the light, the precise angle of his stance, the quiet authority radiating from every line of his posture. I found myself taking a small step closer to the edge of the terrace, allowing a soft breeze to brush against my skin, the sound of distant traffic below mixing with the low murmur of conversation. Every detail was heightened, every sensation amplified, as though the room had narrowed to a single thread connecting us, taut and alive. I reminded myself to breathe, to remain calm, to navigate this space carefully, yet even in this controlled awareness, a thrill of anticipation coursed through me, a recognition that this encounter, fleeting as it seemed, had already begun to shape the narrative of the evening in ways I could not yet predict. The light caught on his eyes once more, a stormy blue that seemed to pierce through the layers of observation and pretense, and I felt the undeniable gravity of being noticed, truly noticed, in a way that demanded attention, respect, and a careful consideration of what was yet to unfold. I moved cautiously along the edge of the terrace, my fingers lightly grazing the railing as if to ground myself in the moment, the soft click of my heels muffled against the thick carpet beneath the tables. Vincent Blackwood remained a fixed presence in my peripheral vision, his posture unwavering, commanding, yet effortlessly graceful, the slight tilt of his head tracking my every gesture. I tried to engage with the other guests, offering polite nods and smiles, yet the pull of his observation kept drawing my attention back to him, my thoughts scattered like leaves in a gentle wind. The faint scent of roses mixed with polished wood and candle wax hung in the air, blending with the subtle notes of expensive cologne that seemed to drift from him, grounding me in both awareness and unease. I moved toward a small grouping of tables where the golden glow of candlelight highlighted the crystal glasses, careful to maintain composure, yet my heart thumped audibly against my ribcage, each beat a reminder of the intensity surrounding me. A server passed, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and I reached for a delicate plate of smoked salmon, feeling the cool porcelain against my fingertips, aware that even such a small, ordinary act was not escaping his notice. I felt a flicker of self-consciousness as I realized the subtle shift of attention across the room, the hushed conversations, the lowered heads, the almost imperceptible pause in activity, as if the space itself acknowledged his presence. Vincent's eyes followed mine, unwavering, and a faint smile touched his lips, a subtle acknowledgement that made the tension in my chest tighten, a blend of apprehension and fascination threading through every nerve. I adjusted my dress, smoothing the fabric across my shoulders, yet my hands betrayed a slight tremor, a physical echo of the mental strain and awareness of being observed so thoroughly. The soft strains of the string quartet mingled with the gentle hum of conversation, yet each note, each murmur seemed amplified against the backdrop of the silent gravity emanating from him. I took a careful step back, leaning slightly against the railing, and the cool metal sent a shiver up my spine, grounding me in the present even as my mind raced through the possibilities of why I had captured his attention so completely. The faint glint of his cufflinks caught the light, a precise detail in a room full of opulence, and my gaze lingered, the subtle elegance of his movement both commanding and mesmerizing. I reminded myself to breathe, slow, measured inhalations through my nose, the exhale steadying my racing heart. Yet every movement he made seemed to pull me further into an invisible gravity, an unspoken narrative unfolding in the space between us. A sudden ripple of conversation caught my ear, a toast raised, glasses chiming, yet the sound barely registered against the hum of anticipation, the tension between awareness and curiosity tightening like a taut wire. I shifted my weight, feeling the soft fabric of my dress against my legs, the gentle sway of movement reminding me of the space I occupied, of my autonomy within the room, even as his gaze continued to tether my attention. I glimpsed the subtle interaction of his associates, the fluid efficiency with which they navigated the space, yet all action seemed secondary to the silent communication flowing from him. A soft breeze from the open terrace doors brushed against my hair, carrying with it the faint city air mixed with candle smoke, a sensory anchor as I measured each movement, each response to the silent dialogue between us. My pulse continued its erratic rhythm, a mixture of nerves and fascination, and I realized that with every step, every glance, every moment of stillness, I was becoming aware not just of him, but of the narrative beginning to coil around us, pulling us into a story as precise and deliberate as the chandelier light refracting across the room. I allowed my eyes to meet his once more, holding the gaze just long enough to feel the silent recognition, the acknowledgement of presence and consequence, before turning my attention back to the room, acutely aware that every action, every breath, and every measured smile was part of a delicate dance I had only just begun to comprehend. I stepped back slightly, letting my fingers trail along the edge of the railing as I tried to collect my thoughts, the soft hum of the string quartet and muted conversation washing over me in waves that felt both distant and intimate. The warmth of the candles reflected against the crystal glasses, casting fragmented light across the polished marble, and I caught myself staring at a point just beyond the crowd, grounding my awareness in something tangible. Vincent Blackwood remained in my peripheral vision, his posture unchanged, eyes following with an intensity that made the hairs along my arms stand on end, a subtle pull that I could not resist nor fully understand. I adjusted the strap of my purse, feeling the weight of it against my side, reminding myself to breathe, to inhale slowly through my nose and exhale deliberately, focusing on the rhythm of my heartbeat to anchor my mind. A waiter passed, offering a tray of canapes, and I took one with a measured hand, feeling the cool porcelain against my fingertips, the scent of smoked salmon and herbs faint but distinct, grounding me in the reality of the space around me. The soft rustle of gowns and the low murmur of voices seemed to fade in comparison to the magnetic pull of his presence, each subtle movement of his shoulders, each tilt of his head, carrying weight and meaning beyond explanation. I moved closer to a group of tables, offering polite smiles to those I passed, but my attention kept drifting back, drawn inexorably to the stormy blue of his eyes, the precise angles of his stance, the quiet authority emanating from him without effort. The room seemed to contract, every detail magnified. The shimmer of crystal, the faint scent of cologne, the soft glint of candlelight against polished silverware. I felt a shiver ripple down my spine as a gentle draft swept from the terrace doors, stirring the air around me and brushing my hair against my cheek. My pulse quickened, awareness heightened, and I realized that even ordinary motions, the tilt of my head, the way I held my glass, the careful placement of my feet, were part of an unspoken dialogue with him, subtle yet undeniable. A faint smile curved his lips, almost imperceptible, and I felt the tension in my chest tighten, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension threading through every nerve. I reminded myself to maintain composure, to act naturally, yet every glance, every subtle interaction was filtered through the lens of his attention, magnified by the silent gravity that seemed to anchor the room around him. I moved slowly toward the edge of the terrace, letting the railing support me, aware of the soft murmur of the city below, the distant honk of traffic, the rustle of fabric from passing guests, all grounding me, yet secondary to the pull of his presence. My gaze flicked to the subtle details, the tilt of his wrist, the faint glint of cufflinks, the relaxed precision in the way he held himself, each element an indicator of the control and command he wielded effortlessly. I breathed deeply, focusing on the cool metal beneath my fingers, the soft brush of air against my skin, the rhythm of my heartbeat, yet the awareness of being observed remained a constant, magnetic force. I felt a mixture of anticipation and curiosity, a sense of entering into something both unfamiliar and compelling, every movement, every breath, every measured gesture part of an intricate dance that I was only beginning to understand. The soft clinking of a nearby glass, the faint scrape of a chair, all seemed amplified, yet I remained aware, present, alert, sensing the invisible threads connecting us in a web of silent communication, subtle yet potent, guiding the narrative that was beginning to unfold before me. As I stood there, poised and attentive, I felt the undeniable pull of his gaze, an energy that was precise, deliberate, and commanding, threading through the space between us, drawing me forward into a story that I could sense was just beginning, a narrative shaped by presence, awareness, and the quiet intensity of being seen in a way that demanded both attention and respect. I stepped closer to the edge of the terrace, letting the city lights spill across my vision, each flicker of neon and reflection in the glass below a reminder of the world beyond this charged bubble of silence and attention. Vincent Blackwood remained a fixed presence, his form sharp against the soft glow of the chandeliers, every movement deliberate, every subtle gesture filled with a precision that made the space around him feel both smaller and more expansive at the same time. I adjusted my posture, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, attempting to exude composure, yet the flutter in my stomach betrayed the awareness of being watched, of being measured with a focus that was exacting and impossible to ignore. The faint clink of crystal and the low murmur of conversation reached me, distant, like background noise, yet my senses remained tuned to him, each glance and shift of his stance a signal I could not fully interpret but could not ignore. I felt the smooth texture of my clutch in my hand, grounding myself, focusing on the sensation of leather against skin, the cool metal clasp beneath my fingers, anything tangible to anchor me amidst the silent gravity that hung between us. A waiter passed with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and I accepted one with a careful, controlled movement, the warmth of the plate transferring through my fingers, a reminder that I existed fully in this moment even as my attention remained drawn to him. I caught the subtle shift of his eyes as I moved, the brief narrowing of his gaze, and a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a signal that did not go unnoticed, tightening the coil of anticipation in my chest. The soft hum of the string quartet shifted slightly, the music flowing around the edges of my consciousness. Yet every note seemed filtered through the awareness of his presence, each chord amplified, each pause weighted with significance. I found myself moving with more deliberate steps, placing each foot carefully, letting the smooth floor guide the motion while keeping my movements natural, yet aware that he observed every micro-adjustment, every subtle shift in expression or posture. The air carried a faint scent of roses and polished wood, mixing with the distant aroma of hors d'oeuvres, grounding me in reality even as the tension between us built in quiet intensity. My pulse quickened, each beat echoing like a drum in my ears, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat mingling with the silent communication threading between us. I glanced at the marble floor beneath my feet, the reflections of candlelight casting fractured patterns, the shimmering light catching the folds of my dress, reminding me of the tangible world even as the invisible gravity of his attention pulled me further into awareness. I could feel a subtle shiver of anticipation ripple along my spine, the awareness of being noticed, acknowledged, and assessed in a way that was precise, deliberate, and magnetic, threading through the space between us, pulling me into a narrative that was unfolding quietly but inexorably. Every detail, from the tilt of his head to the placement of his hands, the slight shift of weight, the calm, controlled expression, conveyed a power that was subtle yet undeniable, a presence that seemed to bend the room without raising a voice or drawing attention from others. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs, grounding myself in the rhythm of existence even as the silent tension enveloped me, and I understood that every measured step, every subtle glance, and every controlled gesture would become part of an unspoken story, a delicate interaction shaped by presence, awareness, and the precise attention of a man who commanded a room without uttering a single word. I shifted slightly, letting my fingers slide along the cool railing as I tried to steady the tremor running through my hands, the soft glow of candlelight reflecting against the crystal and polished marble in a way that seemed almost unreal. Vincent Blackwood remained perfectly still, a tower of composed energy amidst the muted chatter and delicate clinks of glass, his gaze following me with an unwavering intensity that made the space between us feel both intimate and charged. I focused on the rhythmic tapping of my heels on the marble floor, counting each step to anchor myself, feeling the subtle sway of my dress and the way the light caught the folds of fabric, grounding me in the tangible while the weight of his presence tugged at my awareness. The faint scent of polished wood, roses, and a hint of cologne drifted through the air, layering over the soft strains of the string quartet and the low murmur of conversation, yet all seemed muted under the gravity of his observation. I glanced at the tray of hors d'oeuvres being passed, feeling the smooth texture of porcelain and the faint aroma of smoked salmon, letting these details fill my senses and steady my thoughts while he remained a fixed point of attention. The subtle shift in his posture, the imperceptible tilt of his head, carried more meaning than any words, a quiet communication that threaded through the room, compelling me to navigate each movement with deliberate care. I adjusted my stance, shifting weight from one foot to another, letting the cool metal of the railing support me as I inhaled slowly and exhaled deliberately, matching my breath to the rhythm of my heartbeat as I tried to maintain composure. Every glance toward him revealed another layer of awareness, the stormy blue of his eyes fixed on me, calculating, observing, assessing, and the gentle curve of his lips hinted at recognition, a subtle acknowledgement that sent a ripple of anticipation through me. I moved closer to the terrace edge, feeling the soft draft brush against my arms, the faint whisper of air against my neck, and each detail of the room seemed heightened, every reflection of crystal and candlelight magnified under the unspoken tension between us. The soft hum of conversation, the muted laughter of nearby guests, the rustle of fabric as waiters passed, all were background to the silent narrative that wove through our shared space. I felt a thrill of awareness, a sense of being part of a story unfolding with precision and intent, every micro-movement, every measured gesture contributing to the unspoken dialogue between us. A faint shimmer of light caught his cufflinks, the subtle gleam drawing my eyes, and I noted the effortless control in the way he shifted his weight, the small, precise movements that commanded attention without raising a voice. I allowed my focus to wander for a moment, taking in the polished floors, the intricate carvings along the walls, the soft glow of the chandeliers, all the while aware that each detail was framed against his presence, the magnetic pull threading through my perception. My pulse quickened, anticipation and curiosity mingling with a deep sense of awareness, the subtle dance of observation and response threading between us, a silent rhythm that dictated the flow of the evening and set the stage for the moments yet to unfold. I stepped slightly aside, letting my hand rest lightly against the cool edge of the terrace railing as I tried to steady the fluttering in my chest, the soft glow of chandeliers and flickering candlelight reflecting across the polished marble and crystal glasses in a way that made everything shimmer with quiet anticipation. Vincent Blackwood remained a fixed point in my vision, the precise angles of his shoulders and the calm calculation in his stormy blue eyes drawing my attention as though the rest of the room had ceased to exist. I felt the gentle pull of curiosity and caution coiling together inside me, each breath deliberate, slow, measured, grounding myself while simultaneously aware of the magnetic focus directed toward me. The faint hum of conversation reached my ears, distant, muted, almost inconsequential compared to the silent dialogue threading between us, the subtle tension vibrating through the room like a taut string. I shifted my weight slightly, feeling the smooth marble beneath my feet and the soft sway of my dress, each movement deliberate, controlled, yet aware of. His gaze following every subtle gesture. A waiter passed by, and I accepted a small plate, the cool porcelain grounding my fingers, the aroma of smoked salmon and delicate herbs a tangible anchor in the midst of heightened awareness. I could feel the rhythm of my heartbeat, each thump echoing softly in my chest, mingling with the soft strains of the string quartet, a sensory reminder that I existed fully in the moment, even as the invisible gravity of his observation held me in its subtle pull. My green eyes flicked toward the polished surface of a table, the reflection of candlelight casting fractured patterns across the marble, and I noticed the faint glint of his cufflinks catching the light, a small, precise detail magnified by the attention he commanded effortlessly. The subtle curve of his lips hinted at recognition, an acknowledgement of presence that carried weight, the pull of anticipation threading through my awareness and pulling me further into a story I was only beginning to perceive. I adjusted my posture, shoulders back, head slightly tilted, every movement deliberate, measured, balancing composure with the undeniable thrill of being truly seen, observed with a focus that made the space between us feel taut with potential. The air was perfumed faintly with roses and polished wood, layered with the distant scent of hors d'oeuvres, grounding me in reality while simultaneously heightening the intensity of the moment. Each glance from him carried a silent weight, a subtle communication that demanded attention and awareness, and I felt myself responding instinctively, adjusting my steps, my gestures, the tilt of my head, maintaining balance, poise, and presence in a room that seemed to pulse with our unspoken connection. The soft murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the distant city sounds outside the terrace doors, all became secondary to the intricate awareness threading through our space, a rhythm of silent observation, subtle acknowledgement, and deliberate composure. I inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill my lungs, exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the present while every sense remained tuned to him, aware of the pull and the silent gravity that drew me into an unfolding narrative of attention, recognition, and quiet intensity, each step, each measured motion weaving into the precise, magnetic presence that dominated the space without uttering a single word. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the center of the terrace, feeling the gentle sway of the city lights reflecting in the glass below, each flicker a reminder of the world moving beyond this charged bubble of awareness. Vincent Blackwood's gaze followed, precise and unwavering, the stormy depth of his eyes capturing every subtle motion I made, every micro-expression that betrayed my inner thoughts. I felt the pulse of my own heartbeat accelerate slightly, each beat echoing through my chest, blending with the quiet hum of conversation that surrounded the room, now filtered through the intensity of his silent observation. The soft murmur of the string quartet intertwined with the clink of crystal, yet every sound seemed amplified by the tension threading between us, each note a reminder of the presence that demanded attention without raising a voice. I adjusted my dress, smoothing the fabric across my shoulders, feeling the coolness of the marble floor under my heels, grounding myself in the tangible sensations of the evening, while the invisible gravity of his observation held me in a suspended state of awareness. Every subtle detail registered: the tilt of his head, the precise alignment of his shoulders, the faint glint of cufflinks catching the chandelier light, and the gentle curve of his lips that hinted at recognition without expression. I shifted slightly, letting the railing support my hand, the metal cool beneath my fingertips, and focused on the rhythm of my breath, slow and deliberate. Each inhale and exhale an attempt to anchor myself in the present moment while the magnetic pull of his presence wove through my senses. I moved closer to the edge of the terrace, letting the gentle breeze stir the fabric of my dress, the faint scent of roses and polished wood mingling with the aroma of hors d'oeuvres in a grounding sensory tapestry. My pulse continued its rhythmic climb, a mixture of anticipation and focused awareness, and I realized that each deliberate gesture, how I held my glass, the tilt of my head, the subtle adjustment of my stance, was magnified under his attention, an unspoken dialogue flowing silently between us. I felt the tension coil around me, not oppressive but magnetic, compelling me to navigate each movement with careful precision, aware of the subtle shifts in expression and posture that conveyed observation, acknowledgement, and the quiet command of presence. The soft light from the chandeliers fractured against the crystal, casting delicate patterns across the polished floors, and every reflection seemed heightened, every shimmer of color intensified in the context of his watchful gaze. I reminded myself to maintain composure, to breathe through the tension and allow the room to remain my anchor, yet the awareness of being observed, of being measured with deliberate attention, threaded through my thoughts and sharpened my senses. A faint smile curved his lips, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a ripple of awareness and anticipation through me, each nerve attuned to the silent narrative unfolding between us. I stood poised, fully conscious of every motion, every breath, every subtle micro-expression, feeling the invisible pull of a connection forming, a story taking shape through presence, attention, and the quiet, deliberate intensity of being truly seen in a room that had, for a brief and charged moment, narrowed to just the two of us.